Well, hi there, Sax Gourmet fans, and welcome to our every other Tuesday Facebook Live seminar. And tonight, oh man, tonight we're going to talk about something you've all heard about. A lot of you own one, but almost none of you know the whole story. And we're going to talk about the Selmer Mk VI. Now, just about any of us who have ever played for a living at one time or another probably owned one. And you know, certainly when you're sitting there at the bar talking to people, you know, the subject just about always comes up. So, you know, I'm speaking to you tonight from our ultra top secret command and control bunker right here in the historic Garden District of Old New Orleans. I've been in this saxophone business for a long time. So if you don't know about me, you ask your mama, because your mama remembers me. She sure does. Hey, Kay, glad to have you with us. So anyway, let's get some definitions out of the way. And I want to remind you that you can ask questions during the seminar. I'll try to answer them in real time. There's my sister-in-law, Anna Goodson, and I'm very proud to have her with us. So what made a Mk VI a Mk VI? Now understand that these horns evolved continuously throughout their production history from 1954 up until 1985. Did you hear me? I said 1985. 85. That's right. Contrary to what you may have been led to believe. They didn't make all the models up through 85, but they made some, and we'll get to that in a minute. These horns were built entirely without blueprints. So, you know, as people at the factory decided there would be a change made, they would go ahead and make that change. And you see a tremendous amount of variation in these. I bought and sold literally hundreds of these over my career in the saxophone business, and you know, every one of them certainly plays a little different, and every one of them, you know, is actually made a little different. So let's talk about the 19 advantages that Selmer said you'd get only with the Mk VI, as opposed to the previous model, which was the super action. No, not the super balanced action. The official name was the super action. First, Selmer said, look, we've got a whole new octave key mechanism that's stronger, more stable, and they even took out a patent on that. Secondly, for the first time, they had an adjustable thumb rest for the right hand. Oh, what a great idea. Before, the thumb rest was just soldered onto the body. And the best thing that they did, in my opinion, was having the rocker low B flat, where that whole table floated, and man, was it ever comfortable. Of course, they had a much larger button for the left-hand thumb, and it was plastic because they said it was more comfortable. They also changed the design of the chromatic C and B flat, so they were a little quieter, gave a little more precise feel. They made some other revisions to that later in the production run, and we'll talk about that when we look at the evolution. One of the really nice things that they did was Selmer made the Tonex resonator, which was a nickel-plated, domed, screw-back brass resonator, and they were nice and big on these. And by the way, if any of you guys want to buy some original Tonex resonators, I got some. The bad news for you is I know what they're worth, but I do have some, and I will sell them. Selmer changed the way they did the receiver collar where the screws go, gave it a lot more mass, changed the configuration of the screws, and they also changed the key guards for the low C, low E flat, and all that. So now for example, the low C had 3 feet instead of just 2. They changed the configuration of the clothing guard that was on the back of the right-hand stack, and very significantly, they added that ring bell-to-body brace. Selmer said it would help absorb impacts. I don't know about that because I've had to round out too many of them that were bent. But yeah, it's certainly better than the old system, which was just one, little brass rod. Another thing that was very, very important, that's so different and so much better, is they changed the way the low C sharp key was sprung, and it works just like a real saxophone key now. Selmer also used, they claim, a different blued steel needle spring than they were using on the Super Action series. I'm gonna tell you, I don't know whether that's true or not. I never could tell the difference, but if they say they're different, okay, I'm gonna buy into that. Selmer also changed the geometry of the front F key, made it much more usable, and they also changed the configuration of the ribs that held the main stack and some of the other keys. The Mark VI was definitely better looking and better finished with regard to the lacquer jobs or plating jobs. And then they also, another great quantum leap forward was on that bridge between the F sharp tone hole, F sharp key cup, and the lever that operates the bis and also keeps the G sharp closed. They made it fully adjustable, which, that's a nice thing. Another thing that they did was Selmer also used, they say, a different brass. Now, listen, it wasn't recycled artillery shells, so all you who believe that, all the artillery shells that they use, they got from the Easter Bunny or the Tooth Fairy or Sasquatch or Santa Claus. Quit reading Sax on the Web. Stop it. They always bought their brass from the same supplier, and it was not recycled brass. They took a lot of pride in their assembly, quality control, and really, they were a nice horn. Now, there were not any Mark VIs, they claim, made, at least altos and tenors, after 1974. And I got to stop right now and tell you this. I have a customer and a good friend who is very, very, very famous guy. And he received as a gift from Patrick and Jerome Selmer when he visited the factory in France, a gold-plated Mark VI Alto. I have personally overhauled that Alto. I've also serviced it when he was through New Orleans. I am absolutely certain what serial number is that's stamped on that horn. Absolutely certain. It's 261,000. I never saw one later than that. There were not any true Mark VII, which was the model that followed up, sopraninos, sopranos, baritones, or basses. Now, all of those, they continued the Mark VI design on up until 1981 on everything except the sopranino, and they continued it till 1985. So there were a few baritones, and I've seen one that was stamped Mark VII, but I swear It looked just like a Mark VI to me, except it said Mark VII on it. There were also, they say, a few sopranos that were stamped as Mark VII as well. I've never seen one. That does not mean they didn't exist. Now, all the Mark VIs, be it, a sopranino up through a bass, they were all manufactured in France. Now, after they were made, the instrument designated for the UK market or the American market were shipped unassembled and unengraved and unlacquered to their respective markets for assembly and completion. The engraving, as you look at it, is a sure way to quickly tell where that horn was assembled. The French assembled Mark VIs may or may not be engraved at all. The engraving, matter of fact, cost about $50 extra at the time. Some of the French French assembled ones had either nickel-plated or silver-plated keys with a lacquered finished body. And another thing that they made a very few of, they did some in colored lacquer. I understand there was some in pink, blue, and red. There was a guy I used to play with that had a red one, and his father had bought it new, so I'm quite satisfied that was original. The British assembled ones often have a medallion engraved in the center of the front of the bell, and it's really quite pretty. The American ones always have that floral scroll type motif, and very occasionally the American ones would extend that engraving down onto the bow, but that's very uncommon. Now, the Super Action had been a very successful saxophone for Selmer, and they made it up until 1954. It was really a nice playing horn, but Selmer kind of scratching their head and said, we can do better. And so one of the most significant changes, other than the ones I already mentioned on mechanism and such as that, was that they altered the bore taper. The Mark VI is actually a little different bore than a Super Action. And the taper of the bore is different. It doesn't have as much of a parabola. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, and you guys know that I love Selmers, but they never could get the intonation on these things right. As a matter of fact, during the production run of these things, they used 3 different bows on the altos. And believe me, when you get to swapping out bows and stuff to try to make them play in tune, you got a problem. They also changed the necks on both the alto and the tenor, seeking better intonation. And it's said, and I don't believe this, and I asked Jerome Selmer about this, and he told me it wasn't true, but some people say that after 180,000, they used a different alloy for, the brass. The fact of the matter is, I don't believe that's true. The people who say, well, the 5-digit horns play better or sound different and all that, I don't deny that they do. But I think we can attribute that more to a change in the neck design than to anything else. Now, it's also said, and I don't, once again, I don't particularly buy this, but it is commonly said that the later ones, say after 180, 190,000, didn't have the same level of assembly quality. I don't buy into that either. Now, if you're considering buying a Mark VI and paying top dollar, then I think it's important to understand this. Every one of these horns was a little bit different, and every horn got play tested before it left either the Elkhart Assembly Facility or London or the French Assembly Facility. And they graded them according to 3 different categories. And this is very important to know. If you know the provenance of the horn and you know that it was originally given to a famous Selmer endorsing artist, that's the horn you want to buy, or that's the one they thought at the time it was made was the best. Next, they had the next tier went to favored dealers. You know, I'm sure that some of the stores in the major markets in New York, Los Angeles, for example, they probably got better Mark VIs than the ones we got where I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. So if you can check back the known sales history and have it documented, did you hear me? Have it documented, repair tickets with serial number, whatever. If it used to belong to Sonny Rollins, chances are it's a pretty good horn. I've been fortunate over the years to get to play some horns that belong to some famous artists, and the big boys did tend to get better horns than we did. I got to tell you the story of how I acquired my first Mark VI. In 1964, and I was all of 14 years old, I tried out for the first time for the All-State Band. And my dad, being a good dad, said, hey, if you don't make the band, don't worry about it. But if you do, you make first chair, I'll buy any kind of damn saxophone you want. So sure enough, I went out to the audition at the University of Alabama. And sure enough, I made first chair. And sure enough, my dad bought me a Mark VI tenor. And that horn has served me. I still own that horn. And it served me well for many years. Now, if you get a Mark VI with a known provenance, one other thing about the way that horn was acquired, my dad was a pretty slick operator. And so when it was time for him to essentially pay up and get me that Mark VI, he put me on a bus we lived in Leeds, Alabama, right outside of Birmingham. So I got on a bus, went downtown Birmingham to the Phipps Music Company, and my dad gave me his personal check for $500 made payable to the Phipps Music Company. And I went down there, they wanted $660 for the horn and another $90 for the Samsonite tri-pack case. And little 14-year-old me walked up to the counter and said, I want that Mark VI. And my daddy gave me this check for $500. And he said, if you wouldn't take it, just turn and walk out. They took it. So we got a nice discount on that. Now, at the time that we bought that horn, the high F sharp key was optional. And my recollection is that it was $90 extra. That sounds like a lot, but I believe that's what I believe it was. I bought one without the F sharp key. And then people say that they believe that the horns with the F sharp key play better. Without the F sharp key play better than the ones with the F sharp key. All right, now let me tell you something. I do know a thing or two about saxophone acoustics and design. And if you have a horn with a high F sharp key that the bore taper was designed to allow for that high F sharp key, it doesn't make any difference. If you got a horn that's designed to not have an F sharp key and you add an F sharp key to it, that makes a difference. I think the guys at Selmer were smart enough to make allowance for that. Now, little known to me, because I'd have damn sure bought one if I'd known it was available at the time, Selmer made what they call the concert model, which not only had a high F sharp, but it also had a G sharp trill key on the right hand. A high D to E flat trill key also operated on the right hand, and a forked E flat key. Ooh, baby, you know I've always loved all the gizmos you can get, and I'd have sure gotten one of those. Later on, and this was probably the best alto I've owned up until I started making my own. I had a gold-plated low A Mark VI alto that had a high F sharp key, as well as a low A key, of course. And boy, that was a sweet player, but somebody offered me way too much money for that one day, and they walked out of here with a nice alto. Nobody really seems to know how many of those Mark VI altos with a low A key were made. I've heard all kind of numbers. The number I hear the most is 166, but Doug Piper, who's a great historian that we should all be grateful for, Doug says there were a lot more than that, and I believe that. I believe that as well. Hello, Raul. So anyway, I don't know, and I'm not sure. But I do know this, that low A horn was nice, except the balance of it was different because it was heavier in the front. And it was just generally all around heavier. One thing we can be sure of is that the Mark VI, more than any other horn in history, really influenced the design of all modern saxophones. They all somewhat go back to that. And I'm going to tell you, there's one company that I know of that is having some horns made across the great waters to the west. And those horns are absolute dead ringers for Mark VIs. And I'm not talking about just the tone holes the same size and all that. I'm talking about damn things look just like them and play just like them too. And a friend of mine owns that company. I'm not going to say anything bad about them because there's nothing bad to say. If you want a Mark VI, they're out there willing to sell you one. Now, another thing before we get too far into this is that we probably ought to address the issue of, well, if they were doing so well and selling so many of these, why did they quit making them? And why people making them today? And I'll tell you, when I worked for Orpheus Music, which was the parent company to LA Sax, Vespro, and a number of other brands of Laura, we were making a horn, having a horn made for us by a company in Taiwan called Fupin, that all of the acoustics were identical to a Mark VI, and the damn things played just like one. And if you own a LA Sax model 750 or 850, measure the tone holes and then measure your favorite Mark VI. You see, all that's the same, and the body taper's the same. But why did they quit making them? Well, Jerome Selmer told me that the fact of the matter was, after they'd been making these things for 20 years, and there were, a couple 100,000 of them floating around, that suddenly used Mark VIs were their biggest competitor. And so they needed to do something different. Now, I've always thought that the Mark VII was a great leap forward. I played one for a while. I've owned a bunch of them, and I like them. Now, here's a couple things that aren't true. The tooling didn't wear out because as many of these things they were selling, if that was the only issue, easy to make some more. Tooling. Another thing is that Selmer wanted to always be seen as the cutting edge, and at the time they certainly were. And they were also very dedicated to the Selmer sound. They believed, and I agree, that the Mark VII was a superior instrument, superior design. So anyway, I don't know why they quit making them, but I think it was a very good business decision on their part, and I want to assure you the people in Selmer family are far from stupid. They're nice people. Now, why did they call the horn the Mark VI in the first place? Where did the name come from? Well, it was the sixth model since Selmer began producing saxophones. It was released in 1954 to commemorate the 50th anniversary of Selmer winning the gold medal at the St. Louis exhibition for a saxophone. Who designed the thing? Well, the great French classical saxophonist Marcel Moulet, my classical saxophone hero, was very, very much the main guy, although other people contributed, of course. The smaller bore that they brought about with the Mark VI gave it a lot more flexibility. Hello, Dwight. One of my heroes, Dwight Anderson, is with us now. I used to stand out when I was 13, 14 years old. I'd stand at the door of the Boom Boom room where Dwight was playing with the Tikis, a great band, and listen to him. And Dwight, I'm still playing licks that I stole from you during that period. But anyway, the smaller bore gave the horn a little more flexibility, and it continued to have good cut and projection. The key word was really the quantum leap forward. And I think you can talk to anybody who's played a Mark VI for any length of time, and they're going to tell you it's definitely one of the most comfortable saxophones ever made. The only thing that I think is superior as far as older horns go is the Buffet S1, and you all know I love that. Now, my research indicates that they made some Mark VIs with an altissimo octave key system. I've never seen one, and the fact that I never saw one doesn't mean it didn't exist. All it means is I never saw one. Never seen one offered for sale, so who knows? And so anyway, the first one that they made, first Mark VI, appears to be number 54,539, which was a tenor. And the first alto didn't come around till 54,875, and that horn was silver plated. Now, they were really cranking out a lot of horns. And so, you know, the fact that a horn has a serial number which indicates its production date doesn't mean it didn't sit in the warehouse for a while before it was shipped out to a dealer such as that. So my horn, the one I referenced that my parents bought me in 1964, apparently floated around through the distribution system for almost a year before it found a happy home with me. So this isn't uncommon at all. They claim, and the records tend to support this, that the first Mark VII was an alto, 230,839, and the first tenor was 231,087. The oldest Mark VI that I've personally owned was I had a tenor for a while that was a 244,000. And the oldest Mark VII that I ever owned was a 236,000. The oldest number anybody's ever seen on a Mark VI soprano is 324,164. And it's very important to understand that after they quit making Mark VI altos and tenors, they kept on cranking out sopranos, baries, and sopraninos. Now, by the way, it's never too late to share this with your friends and groups, and it's never, ever too late to say you like this seminar. I hope you're learning something as we go along. Now, for Mark VI altos, we need to talk about some of the serious intonation problems that they had. Selmer, of course, was a small enough company and flexible enough to where they said, bell key notes on this horn not playing too good. Maybe we need to make some changes, and they did. They had 3 different bows that they used, and it's important that you look at if you go to the Facebook group that we have, the Selmer Paris saxophones, and go to the photos, there's pictures of 3 of those horns lined up next to each other so you can compare them. The first horn that they made was what we call a short bow, and they did that up until about 72,500, and then around they went to what they call the medium bow, and that wasn't working out too good. And then they went to a long bow around 87,500, and that lasted for a while. Then they went back to a medium bow at 134,000. The records don't really tell us all that, but you can spot them easily is by where the 2 bands that connect the bell and the body tube are. On the short bow, these bands are parallel. On the long bow, there's a gap between the bands, and on the bell side, that band's up high. On the medium bow, they're closer together, but not straight across from each other. Now, here's another thing you need to understand. The intonation on the Mark VI Altos they had a lot of problem with the lower notes, a lot of problems. And on many of the Elkhart assembled horns, if you take the bow and the bell off and feel around up at the upper radius of the bow, you're gonna find a big old brass baffle has been soldered in there to try to reduce the volume. So they changed the length of the bow, but they wanted to change the actual cubic capacity. Did it ever work out? No. Intonation didn't really get right on Selmer Altos up until the Mark VII. And I know that's blasphemy. Hey, Donna, thank you for joining us. Donna Schwartz, one of the great saxophone teachers of this age. And Donna's going to be on air as soon as we're through tonight over there on her site and give you another great seminar on playing. Another thing that goes on is serial numbers on the neck. Now, necks are different. Horns are different. And when they were assembling these things and checking them all out, they would match a neck and a body. And in theory, they would stamp the serial number onto the neck so you know which body it matched. Well, that's true. But then that's not true. On my personal tenor, that first one, is they didn't stamp the number on there. But what they did was etch with, it looks like a hand scriber, the last three digits of the serial number inside the tenon. And my horn also has the last 3 digits of the serial number on the back of the high E key. Now, it's important to understand also while we're talking about these things like different colors and all that, is that they stopped putting the original stamping on the neck around 134,500. People ask me all the time, said, Steve, how is it that you can look at the lacquer and tell whether it's original or not? Well, I've been doing this since right after the earth cooled. But the fact is they're all different colors, particularly U.S. horns, are all different colors. Why? I asked Ralph Morgan, who was the plant manager in Elkhart for many years, and Ralph told me, he said, hell, Steve, we mixed up the lacquer every day. And we weren't exactly using a hard and fast recipe, so yeah, it's a little different. And this was nitrocellulose lacquer, not the epoxy lacquer that we use today. And so for that reason, it ages a little differently. I got a good buddy that's got a 1955 Alto, and that thing's green. And it's probably 98% original lacquer. Another thing that was done to the neck was they changed the taper of it and moved the saddle on the neck around 160,000. They moved the side B and C keys a little bit. That's the B flat and the side C. They were originally a tongue and groove design, see, and then they went to that damn ball mechanism, and they click. They make a lot of racket. And if you own one of those and it makes a lot of racket, put a little, I use lithium grease in there from time to time, and that'll get rid of it. Another thing is about the brass, and I want to emphasize that Jerome Selmer says we never changed the recipe of the brass. They changed the taper of the neck. That'll make the horn sound different, but they didn't change the recipe for the brass. All I remember were made in France, but they were shipped unassembled. And why did they do that? Why did they send them to the United States unfinished? To save on the import taxes. There's nothing more to it than that. The engraving was different, and also the Elkhart assembled ones you'll always see. If it's got the original pads, you'll see some overspray because they shot a final coat of lacquer on there after they were completely put together. You'll see some traces of lacquer on the key touch pearls, and you'll also see it on the perimeter of the pads. The American horns also, the engraving was almost always the same. It was identical. The European ones, I've owned European engraved ones. I've owned some that didn't have any engraving, but it was different. I think it was different engravers, obviously. So, there you go. Let's see. And I'm wading through all these page after page after page of notes. So we'll get you all this stuff. Jerome Selmer was adamant that they never used recycled artillery shells. And there was, like I said, all that variation. And from the time they were manufactured up until the time they were shipped. So all that serial number is going to tell you is when they were made. It doesn't going to tell you when it actually got to the first owner. As far as that low A alto business, and I understand, I think Professor Paul Cohen told me that he owned a low A tenor. I'd love to see a picture of that if that's available. But low A altos were not originally made by Selmer. There's a lot of information that indicates that Adolph Sax made some low A altos. Certainly Quinon made some in the 1930s. And so, I don't know. Let's see, we talked about the interesting finishes. Colored lacquers, Mark 7 berries, and Selmer really, and if you talk to a member of the Selmer family, you'll be immediately impressed with their dedication of what they call the Selmer sound. That they have a very good image of that, and they're very proud of that, and they should be. But none of the Selmer saxophones, at least the ones made before, about 1980, were conceived as a big band horn or a jazz horn. The Selmers were really more of a classical horn than anything else, and they did that beautifully. But they were also a very flexible horn. With respect to this stuff about the 5-digit horns being better, well, the very first ones had a lot of carryover key work from the balanced action, or the super action series, and that's a good thing. Are they better? Well, they're different. And, you know, they use a different taper on the neck, and that certainly gives them a different sound. You know, I don't know. Are they better? Well, is red better than green? I don't know. I don't think the European horns or the American horns are superior one to another. Springs and the felts on the U.S. horns, I always thought were a little better. I don't know where they source their felts, but they seem to be different. Once again, if you're buying one and you're paying top dollar, be sure and check the provenance if that information is available, and find out who the original owner was. And so, yeah, as far as these changes in necks, we make a neck, you know, that we think brings them up to speed and cures a lot of the problems that people have with the intonation, particularly the palm keys and the bell key notes. So anyway, the U.S. horns will have that serial number stamped on them up through, what was it, 134,000, something like that. The French numbers they'll have the last three digits etched inside there. And let's see. We've covered all that tube to bow and all that good stuff. I guess we need to search through all these copious notes that I have there and look for the fact that, you know, find where the different changes took place in the evolution. And I apologize to you, but like I said, there were there were a lot of things that changed. Another thing to understand is that during World War II, of course, all the Selmers were manufactured in the same place. But the Selmer factories, they had factories in Normandy and in Paris and in Montage, and the only thing that slowed down their production, they kept making horns all through World War II, was the fact that sometimes materials would not be available. But those factories were never bombed or any of that. You know, in the United States, of course, all the factories got converted to war production, but that doesn't seem to have been the case at Selmer's. Now, they made an awful lot of horns. They made an awful lot of Mark VIs, but every one of them, just like people, is different. And so you need to always keep that in mind. There are a lot of people that say, well, you know, I want to play a Mark VI because, you know, Coltrane played a Mark VI or Sonny Rollins plays a Mark VI. Let me tell you something. Those are people that made a living playing the saxophone. And if you're making a living, then the fact of the matter is you're going to use the best equipment you can so you can maximize the living that you made. And so also people say, well, the old time players played that. Well, of course they did. You know why? Because they had one and it was paid for and they didn't have to buy another horn. Okay, here we go. Here's a chronology. The first ones had a double S on the neck, and they did that on the 54,000 horns and the 55,000 horns. Short bow alto ended about 72,000. The medium bow alto ended about 87,000. The long bow ended around 135,000. The medium bow came back. The neck mechanism that's mounted on a flat plate keeps rocking on till about 155,000. Metal thumb hooks were replaced with plastic thumb hooks for 133,000. And I asked Jerome Selmer, why in the world to do that? He said, because the plastic one had a little bit of flex in it and people thought it was more comfortable. The ball joint side keys, which I hate, I think every repairman does, because they're so noisy, were introduced around 117,000. The body tube taper was changed at the top end of the altos and tenors around 80,000. The serial number on neck ended about 130,000. The strap hook location was changed around 200,000, and the metal resonators were replaced with nylon resonators. And understand, it ain't them cheap polystyrene resonators that a lot of these jackleg repairmen will try to foist off on you. The thing that replaced the Selmer brass Tonex domed resonators, those resonators had a nice screw back so you could recycle them, and they were made of nylon. And should you want some, I got some I'll sell you. And once again, the bad news is that I know what they're worth. The strap hook was moved. Then the key guide, that little fork that the key does that in on the neck, was changed around 155,000. The neck itself underwent a major revision around 180,000. The volume of the neck was actually decreased. The knurling of the bell-to-body ring, which was pretty, but it was only cosmetic, but they quit doing that around 139,000. They used to make the high G and high E rod, which were the longest rods on the horn, out of nickel silver, and they discontinued that around 148,000. Now, Selmer said in their advertising when they introduced the Mark VI that the key tubes were all about 30% bigger than what they'd used on a Selmer Super Action. They also said that the keys, the key cups and other parts were cold forged. Let me let you in on a little secret in saxophone manufacturing. That's the way they make all of them. Hello, Betty Lou. I'm honored you joined us. But at any rate, that's the way they make them. They stamp them like a corn stamp. On the U.S. horns, it said up above the left-hand thumb rest, it said Mark VI in a little circle, and that went on from about 55,000 up to 91,800. Mark VI was engraved on the bell to bow brand, just the words Mark VI, except the 6 was in Roman numerals, from 91,800 up to 140,400. It said Mark VI on the back of the body tube from 140,400 up to 143,500. They must not have thought it was a very good idea. Joel Peskin is watching it. Man, Joel Peskin is one of my heroes. He is a wonderful, nice guy, but he is a playing fool. He is a playing fool, and I love him. Thank you for honoring me by watching this. They quit stamping Mark VI on the bow band after 143.5. Now, understand that these are horns that were made literally one at a time, and it wasn't an assembly line kind of operation. So are there going to be variations? You bet they are. And some play better than others. And while we're talking about this, some play better than others, if you look on our saxophones and saxophone equipment for sale page, or on any of the other for sale groups on Facebook or anywhere else, or on reverb.com, you're not going to find a Mark VI offered for sale that the owner doesn't say, this is one of the great ones. Compared to what? Well, some of them are. Some of them are greater than others, and you need to always take that with a grain of salt. Now, from Selmer's records, there were Barry saxes that were listed as being Mark VIIs, and this happened from about 297,991 through 297,995, and then from 311,888 up through 311,988. And then again from 315,086 up through 315,144. Now, of the ones I've seen personally, maybe some others out there, a lot of them I hadn't seen, of course, is the fact of the matter is that those horns all look to me like pretty much like Mark VI berries, but they said Mark VII on them. And seems like one of them, and it's been 20 years since I saw it, had those big butterfly type spatulas on the low E flat and low C key touches. Now, according to the information I have, there were only 3, quote, Mark VII sopranos made. I've never seen one. But those serial numbers are 315,347 up through 315,350. So what was going on? Well, Selmer was obviously using up Mark VI parts and making Mark VIIs. And so, yeah. And when they started making the Mark VIIs, they quit assembling them in Elkhart. And so all the Mark VIIs were finished in France. So, you know, I don't know. Selmer, those guys are no fools, but I think the main reason they quit making them was they were just losing the market to themselves. So, anyway, if you go and shop around looking at different Mark VIs, understand that most of the sellers of Mark VIs, not all, but most of them, think that any horn that's been re-lacquered 3 times, the engraving's buffed down to where it's smooth as a baby's butt, and the pearl holders all worn down, those horns are all worth $10,000. No, they're not. We make a real effort to track what people are actually paying. Not what people are asking, but what's actually being paid to dealers. I don't consider even eBay or Reverb, because there you got the blind leading the blind, in my opinion. And, you know, yes, there are some horns that I personally was in a room one time and watched one change hands for $18,000 in folding money. I thought that was a lot, but that horn looked like it was brand new. That's a lot of money. Boy, that's a lot of money. But they're not making any more of them. And it's just like the collector car market and all that. People pay an awful lot for originality. Now, where's the market going on these things? Well, they're not making any more of them. But you need to understand that, in my opinion, you know, for what some people are paying for Mark VIs, you can buy a lot better saxophone. A lot better. That's more intuitive, more responsive, etc. Now, people also say, well, the collectors, particularly in Japan, are paying top dollars. Let me tell you something. That feeding frenzy that went on among our good friends in Japan is over. And yes, I shipped a lot of horns to Japan. And yes, I got a lot more money for those at that time than I think you could reasonably expect to get for that same horn today. I know our friend Roberto in New York City, they got a whole room full of wonderful Mark VIs. And if you're up there, you ought to stop and visit Roberto and see some of those horns and buy one. I'm sure Roberto would appreciate it if you would buy one. But, you know, folks, in my opinion, the feeding frenzy's over. It's over. So what about the investment potential for Mark VIs? Unless you've got one that is in absolutely pristine, like new condition, I don't think so. I don't think they're necessarily a good investment. There's better places to put your money. So, one more chance. Be sure and like this seminar, Share it with your friends and family, other groups. I hope you've learned a thing or two. I've enjoyed preparing for this. I learned a lot. If you have questions, I'm always glad to answer them. You can call me during our business hours. And if I'm available to the phone, I'm glad to answer any question about saxophones that you might have. I very much appreciate you watching. I hope everybody has a fine time learning about saxophone. It's a lot of fun. Damn sure been good to me. Mauricio, thank you very much for your kind remarks. I have one of my students watching us tonight. You know, the teachers always got to pay attention when his students are watching. But at any rate, hope you learned something. I've enjoyed preparing for this. And everybody remember, practice long tones, keep your reed wet, and always, always, always play sax gourmet. Why? Because sax gourmet plays best. I thank you for watching. Goodbye for now.